my goodness, it's been a hot minute. I'm not even going to do an intro to this video. We are going to just jump right into it. Mostly because I don't know what to call, what to name this episode, other than it's 287, episode 287. I don't know. I know it's been a couple weeks. You guys probably were worried about me. Maybe you're glad I was gone those couple weeks. I haven't been passing out. Don't worry about that. That's not what it was. But I'll just be straight up with you. We'll just start it with this. Might as well start on a downer right off the bat. It's summertime. Things are busy. Things are going crazy. So I was trying to get things done around the house and some other stuff. In the middle of all that, we one of our dogs passed away. Bella. She was a purebred poodle. She got into some kind of a hornet's nest, and they stung her face and like inside of her mouth, all over the place. It wasn't just one or two stings. The vet pulled out, I think she said 15 to 20 stingers, and there were more in there that they couldn't get out. Anyway, she went through anaphylactic shock. She went crazy. She didn't go crazy, but the pain was horrendous, and she was extremely allergic. And we had to put her down. It sucked a lot, actually. That dog, she was something special. And you'll never understand it if you don't have a dog that you connect with. But when you do, when you find a pet that just is part of the family, something like this is really, really hard to deal with. And man, I'm not gonna lie, it was hard. It was not an easy decision. But we had to say goodbye to Bella. It sucks. That kind of threw me for a loop for, actually, it's been over a week. And I still kind of feel bad about it. But her body was fighting everything that the doctors could do. We didn't just try to take care of her at home. We had to take her to emergency care. And the doctors, or the vets, I should say, they did everything they could to save Bella. But it just wasn't working. And so there's a little void in my heart. But this isn't the point of the show. A big burly dude shedding a tear about his dog. That's not what I want to talk about. But that's why I've been gone for a while. By the way, never mind. I was gonna say that I have a Give, Send, Go set up. It was very expensive. It was a lot of money. It was an exorbitant amount of money. You know what? If you're willing to help out, that'd be fantastic. There's a Give, Send, Go. Maybe I'll put the link in the show notes. It was a lot of money. Whew. So that's why I said I was trying to do everything we could to bring her home. But anyway, why start a show so depressing? That is horrible. Let's just start new. I'll keep that in there because I want to be real with you guys. Like I'm done trying to be fake. I'm done. Actually, I'm not. I'm honestly, what you see in the show is what is me. But let's move on to something that I really wanted to talk about. I don't even know what to call this episode. I'm not sure how to phrase it. I'm gonna get a drink because I'm very thirsty. It's just water. But I wanted to talk about some of the things that have been going on in the 2A space over the last couple of weeks. There has been a lot of things happening. Some good things, some bad things, some things that were extremely surprising to me, and other things that I knew weren't, it wasn't a big surprise. Just kind of figured that kind of stuff would happen. So let's talk about it. And I'll tell you what we're talking about, and then we're going to go point by point. So it's craziness. We're going to start with Trump's whole DC thing, right? You've seen recently, unless you've been living under a rock, Donald Trump, the mayor of the District of Columbia, obviously hasn't been doing her job, or his job. I'm pretty sure it's a gal. Crime's crazy. Citizens that live around that Maryland area and into DC, they didn't feel safe walking around. DC is a violent city. You think it wouldn't be with what it's supposed to represent, but it's a very dangerous place. Anyway, Trump said, you know what? This is a district. It's not a state, and the Fed should be able to have control in this area because that's the capital. You know, this is where everybody comes together to legislate and govern. So he said, enough. We are going to use federal forces to police the DC area. Obviously, the left is freaking out. They're thinking that he's going to execute martial law across the country and things are going crazy. But when I've seen a couple different news, most probably online, not mainstream news, because they would never do this, interviewing people on the street, citizens that live in that area, and they are extremely grateful. They are happy to see that they don't have to worry about getting mugged or worse as they're walking down the sidewalk. Was it Grand Central Station where people go to is like, it's clean. It hasn't been that way for quite a while. And yeah, critics are saying, well, this is like stop and frisk, and this is all this stuff. Again, federal forces, martial law. Obviously, the left is going to freak out about it. But it's what the people are grateful for in DC right now. Could this turn something negative? Sure, absolutely. You never know what some of these leaders are trying to do. But in the meantime, they've seen a drastic reduction in crime. Even though the left is like saying, well, DC is not that dangerous. Crime has been going down. We've talked about this before. It's not that crime has gone down across the country. Reporting has drastically reduced, especially towards the end of Biden's term. There was a lot of agencies that didn't report crime. And so obviously, if it's not being reported, then it's going to look like it's dropped. But that's not the case. If you talk to people that actually live that experience, they're going to tell you these places are not safe. Anyway, that is amazing in itself. But Trump and, surprisingly, Pam Bondi with the DOJ, bless her heart, they decided not to, just recently, just the other day, they decided not to prosecute folks that are open carrying. And there was some kind of a briefing or something. I saw just a teaser of it. I probably should have done a little bit more research on this particular thing, but as I was perusing some stuff, I saw a little short on this with Trump had a news briefing talking about national reciprocity, which could carry into DC. He made mention that that's something he'd like to see. But anyway, they've decided, the DOJ has decided not to pursue folks that are open carrying in DC as long as they're not a prohibited person. That is huge. That is going to be a huge deterrent to crime. The left isn't going to want to tell you this. We talked about this in the Newsom episode a couple episodes ago, that they'll tell you that crime is higher in red states, but when you go to what cities in those red states have the most violent crime, they're all Democrat-ran cities with tough gun control laws. So it doesn't equate. They always like to dance around the reality of things to make themselves look good, which, of course, every politician is going to do, no matter what party they are affiliated with. But I thought that was really interesting that Trump decided to not go after folks that want to open carry. They don't have concealed carry laws, as far as I understand, in DC, unless you're some kind of a diplomat or somebody in political power. I could be wrong, but from what I understand, I think that's the way it works in DC. So it's a win for people in that Maryland, DC area that work in the city and maybe just live across the border, out of the border of the district. Could be huge. Could we see more violence? Who knows? The violence isn't going to be coming from people that actually legally want to defend themselves. Criminals are going to criminal, no matter what they do. Doesn't matter what laws exist. Look at Chicago, look at Los Angeles, look at New Orleans, look at Baltimore. Like, these places with extreme gun laws still see violent crime committed with firearms. And the left knows this. The gun grabbers understand this. They want that crime to propagate, that violence to propagate, just to bolster their argument about taking guns away, because even the strictest gun laws can't control the violence that guns inflict. And we all understand this. We know this. It's not a gun that does the crime. it's the individual who is wielding a tool to create fear and anxiety and terrorize the public. That's really what it is. So anyway, that's really interesting. At least I thought. I just realized I was going to go down bullet point about what we were going to talk about tonight. Instead, I just went straight full on into the DC thing. So I guess that's where we're going to go with that one. I won't go bullet point by bullet point. We'll just go topic to topic, and you're just going to have to follow along, kids. Maybe you should keep notes, put your notepads out, and sharpen those pencils. The next thing I want to talk about, this was something I was really surprised about. Not because the anti-gun community is not being imaginative and with a little bit of ingenuitive, would that be the word? Because they're always trying to find ways to manipulate the public, to manipulate perception, and honestly use deceit and lies, in my opinion, to control the narrative about what people see and hear and learn about guns. And this is no different. This strategy is something far beyond what any anti-gun group could have even imagined or thought of. So Everytown, we love Everytown, right? That's a Bloomberg organization, and they are extremely vocal when it comes to safer gun laws or gun safety laws. They are in every state. They get involved in any and every firearms related legislation that is talked about in any state and in many, many cities too, especially the larger cities. They are very vocal. They are very active and a little psychotic. They probably smells a lot like cat piss and depression anytime they come into the Capitol. Maybe a little bit of Ozempic mixed in there. Who knows?
Stop it. Get some help.
Joking. I can joke a little bit. But these people are very eager to make their voices heard. Honestly, we, the pro-gun side, should really look at their example and be a little bit more proactive as well. Because a lot of reasons that this negative stuff happens is because the anti-gunners are just so vocal, and they apparently don't work during the day, so they can just go hang out during a session and make their voices heard. But anyway, as usual, I gotta digress because I always get sidetracked. So Guntown, that'd be awesome. What a name for a mall or something. Guntown. All we sell is guns. You walk into a clothing store, you buy a pair of jeans. That took my mind to a different place. You can probably guess. A pair of jeans and an MP7. That'd be rad. Anyway, Everytown for gun safety. Man, my train derails all the time. I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. Everytown for gun safety has come up with a new scheme to influence the public, to change the traditions of the American gun owner. Now, this isn't on their website because I looked, but this was in some kind of a conference that the NSSF happened to be to. But they introduced an idea that they had, and something that I really hope they do, honestly. They've created a gun training program. Something, they're going to certify instructors. They're going to be in every state. They're going to have gun safety training. They're going to advocate for these new gun owners because they're starting to see that there are millions and millions of new young gun owners and minorities and women. That is the next generation of gun owner. And so now they're seeing this and they're like, man, we have got to get in front of this massive influx of potential 2A activists and train them in a different way.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
Now, I'm not joking. This is something that Everytown is really considering. They want to develop the curriculum. Like I say, they're going to certify instructors in these states. They're going to have these gun safety classes. They're going to have some kind of a thing for new gun owners. This is an interesting tactic And it's something that I think we as firearms educators and any 2A minded individual, we really need to get in front of now. Like, we need to get mobilized and active now about reaching out to these people first and really showing the future gun owners, the future of the 2A, how manipulation works and how crafty groups like Everytown are going to be. I mean, think about it. This is Bloomberg's money. So they have millions and millions and millions of dollars and no scruples to create curriculum and a mindset that is, well, you can have a gun, but you can't have these guns because they're scary. This is what they're going to do. They're going to create a whole new theory about the Second Amendment altogether. Now, think about this, because this is hugely important. If the next generation of gun owners view the Second Amendment as obsolete because they don't understand the language, they've never learned the history, and they've definitely never read contemporary documents to what the founders were reading or the things that they were doing to include such an amendment in the Bill of Rights, if they can change that mindset of the next generation, they can easily just nullify the Second Amendment without taking it out. Does that make sense? If people perceive it to be something different, then it has no more power, because the people which give the power won't care about it. So this is really a call to action to all of us firearms instructors, those in the 2A world that try to teach and share things about the space, and especially gun owners throughout America, the hundreds of millions of gun owners in America. This is why I say take somebody shooting all the time. I'm dead serious about that, because the next generation of gun owners, these new young people, these minorities, I was talking about these new minority gun owners a year and a half ago, something like that. We did an episode about this, about a bunch of minorities in California getting firearms training and carrying a gun because the Biden administration and definitely officials in California were not doing anything to keep these women safe. This is the problem, right? The vacuum that's been created by the anti-gun really extremists have created an influx of new gun owners that we need to be working with, not considering about it. We need to find ways to do it. Look, Everytown has worked hard to innovate, to create this future system, which it may not go anywhere. It may just be all hyperbole. I don't think so. I think they really are going to try this. And if it works for Everytown, there's going to be other organizations that do not sound like anti-gun groups, that seem to be very pro 2A, that are going to do the same thing and tear down the culture and the traditions of the firearms world. So get on it. Don't let it happen. Spend time at the range. Take people with you. I cannot stress this enough, how important it is to be active with your friends and to be vocal about being a gun owner. I know it's pretty uncomfortable for some folks. I don't like talking about how many firearms I own. That's kind of not my deal. If you spend any time on Twitter in the 2A space, you're going to know the name You Are a Smartass Carl. That's his handle on Twitter. Carl is a friend of mine. I've spoken with Carl. He loves to share his firearms collection. And the amazing thing about Carl is he came from the anti-gun side. His story of where he got to, how he got to where he is now, is quite amazing. I mean, he was anti-gun. He hated this stuff until he was part of a violent home invasion. Somebody broke into his house and he was shot in this home invasion. And he started to realize why the Second Amendment exists. And now he is a staunch Second Amendment supporter, and he loves to show off his gun collection, which is amazing, by the way. Carl is awesome. If you don't follow him on Twitter or X, whatever the hell you want to call it, You Are a Smartass Carl. Trust me, He's an amazing follow. He's a philosopher. He loves to think about things in a different way. He helps me see things a lot of times in a different way. And we need to follow his pattern as far as talking about how common it is to own a gun. Because in America, it is common to own a gun. Like there's no question about it. That America has the American gun owner, the 100 million, owns almost 500 million guns, which I'm sure that's probably pretty close to what it really is, that number. I think there's a lot of underreporting. It's really like 400 and something million guns, but I think it's over 500 million guns. Just AR style firearms is way over 20 million. I know the actual number that they report is less. It's like 19 or 18 million. I guarantee that number is underreported because they're not counting stripped lowers and 80% and all the stuff that have been influxed into the system and self-made firearms, which aren't illegal, by the way, to be in a lot of gun safes across the country. So do me a favor, for reals, pay attention to what Everytown for Gun Safety is doing. Don't take my word for it. Look into that. I think Guns and Gadgets brought this to my attention. Jared over at Guns and Gadgets. He's a great follow, by the way. Great YouTuber. One day I'll get to hang out with him, I hope, because he's a very good dude and he knows his stuff. He's brought it to my attention. I had to look it up and dig into it myself. And that's why I think this is interesting. And that's why I think you need to pay attention to what's going on. Because this impacts you, this impacts me, and it impacts the entire 2A community because it's going to subvert what we understand as the culture and the responsibility of gun ownership. It's crazy what they're trying. So there's that. The next thing I wanted to talk about is part of the gun culture and what we're seeing, just incrementally things getting kind of torn down, chipped away, and put in the wastebasket of history. So in America, we understand that firearms have been part of our culture since before America, or the United States anyways, was a nation. And from the Battle of Independence all the way up to now, right? Firearms have been embedded in the culture, especially around the cowboy era. That's what a lot of us that grew up watching like A Fistful of Dollars and Hang 'em High and any of those Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns. I love those movies, by the way. Or The Magnificent Seven or Cowboys, right? There's all these great movies from the 60s, 70s, and 80s that really, it probably really wasn't like that, but it definitely birthed in to millions of Americans how cool guns are, especially during the West, the Wild West. And some of that culture still exists in some states, like my state in Idaho. There are some places that are still very much, I shouldn't say they're very much like the Wild West. There's no tumbleweeds and duels out in the streets at noon. But there's a lot of independence, and there's a lot of self-sufficiency in Idaho and other states, even Colorado up until recently. Some of those rural communities really invested in and relied on firearms. So I want to talk about Colorado first. Maybe you've heard this, maybe you haven't. Some of the counties in Colorado, and I have to look on my notes to get all these counties correct. Let me back up just a little bit. For years, for generations, folks in Colorado have shot on public lands with no issues. There's a lot of land in Colorado. If you've been to Western Colorado, you're gonna know how windy and flat and boring, at least Western Colorado, or Eastern Colorado is. Excuse me. Western Colorado is cool. Eastern Colorado. Anyway, these folks that live in Colorado have been used to just going out into the bush and shooting. Nothing wrong with that. Until recently, we've seen a major political shift in Colorado. We've seen major anti-gun laws being shoved down the throats of 2A minded individuals that live in Colorado. Honestly, not even like the extreme 2A, like people that are just used to having a 22 in their pickup while they're checking cows or whatever, right? these people are really getting influenced and beat up over their Second Amendment thoughts. Anyway, so these counties in Colorado have decided that public lands are not going to be able to be used for shooting. I don't know how this works. They're public lands, but whatever. So these are the counties that sounds like are really having an issue. First, the Northern Front Range Sport Shooting Partnership. That covers Boulder, Clear Creek, Gillipan, and Larimer counties. They're tightening restrictions for shooters, right? They're not letting them go out and shoot like they should be allowed to. A lot of this may have to do with urban sprawl, new communities, new places where people are moving and building houses, which I understand that. As gun owners, we're responsible. We're not going to shoot into places where we don't know where that bullet's going to terminate. One of the 4 basic firearm safety rules, right? Know what's your target and what is beyond your target. We need to have a proper backstop. So I understand if there's some urban sprawl, if there's new development, I get that. And maybe there's just things you can't do about that. But that is definitely influencing where these individuals can go shoot. But the Forest Service, here's the other issues, right? So those counties that I just mentioned before, they're all restricting Arapahoe and Roosevelt National Forests and Pawnee National Grasslands. This is all U.S. Forest Service. And now you can't shoot within 150 yards of residences, campsites, or roads, which I guess I can understand that. You should never shoot across the road. You're never going to shoot towards a campsite. Again, you really need to know where that bullet's going to terminate. But there's new closures that are happening in the state of Colorado. So south of County Road 96, I have no idea where this is. Maybe I've been there. I don't know. South of 96 and west of County Road 63 in Larimer County. That's going to close this fall. Like, folks are no longer going to be allowed to shoot there. So Clear Creek County is next. That's, I guess, the next place it's going to happen. Devil's Nose and Clear Creek Shooting Park. There are places like those 2 places, Devil's Nose and Clear Creek Shooting Park. Those are places where I guess shooters are going to be able to come shoot and enjoy their Second Amendment rights. But it's important to understand the reason why I talked about Colorado, why I wanted to bring this up, is this is another tactic to restrict the rights of the American gun owner. As states become more and more restrictive, as federal governments become less and less in tune with the firearms owners of the country, we could see restrictions like this happen more and more in states that are at least not friendly to the Second Amendment. California, Illinois. I was going to say Louisiana, but they're pretty safe right now, even though Baton Rouge is not a good place. Anyway, states that are having issues with gun owners. It's easy to see where state restrictions on land use could happen. This is why it's so important to be involved on the political side at the state level and at the city level, because this is what impacts you directly. Those poor folks in Colorado that said, well, this would never happen. Colorado's a red state. We're never going to have this issue here. It turned on a dime. And if you ask a lot of those folks that live in Colorado, they were so shocked when these anti-gun bills came out, when they're starting to see their legislators shit on the Second Amendment.
What's your profanity?
It's drastic. It's drastic. And it happens fast if we don't do anything about it. That's why it is so damn important to get involved in your state 2A groups, like folks that are actively involved at the state level. This will happen in other states if we do not get in front of it now. Just like the whole every town thing with their gun training. If we do not get ahead of this now, the cancer is going to be so drastically huge that it'll take pretty big measures to bring it back to where things should be. Don't let this happen in your state. Colorado, I'm so sorry that you're dealing with this now. But, I mean, you guys voted for these politicians. You guys allowed it to happen. As much as that sounds like a real dirtbag thing to say, You let it happen in your state, and now you have to fix it. I don't know how else to tell you that. All around the Denver, like the rural, outside of the big cities, obviously not going to happen inside Denver, but places where folks really used to enjoy taking their kids shooting, or they went shooting there as a kid with their grandpa, there's no shooting signs popping up all over the place. So if you're from Colorado, I would really like to hear your input on this. So you can either send it to a thread on X or comment down below in the video. I'd really like to hear your thoughts on this. I want to see it through the Colorado gun owners' eyes, because this is tragic. It's awful. I'd like to help you. As Second Amendment advocate myself, I would love to help everyone in the nation that's dealing with this, but it's good to hear it from people that are actually experiencing it now, and maybe it can help those that could be influenced by this at some later point. So sound off in the comments, or again at Range Minded on Twitter, because I'm on there way too much. Now for something a little bit closer to home, kind of in the same groove. So the Caldwell Nights Rodeo. Maybe you guys have heard about this. Maybe you haven't. If you're not from Idaho, probably not. You probably don't even know where Caldwell is. That's over kind of by Boise. It's on the western side of the state. Caldwell Nights Rodeo has been part of Idaho's rodeo circuit for a very long time. I think even before statehood. It's been ingrained in the Idaho culture for a long, long time. Obviously, with the rodeo, you get the cowboy culture, just like we kind of talked about with Colorado. Well, in 2024, I don't remember this happening, but apparently there was a spectator in the stands last year and was carrying concealed, and the gun went off and it injured somebody.
I just shot myself.
I don't really remember this happening. So because of that, this year, the Caldwell Nights Rodeo said no guns. They posted these signs up saying no firearms are allowed, or firearms prohibited, if I can say that. Something to the effect of no guns, right? Gun-free zone. This has caused quite a stir on both sides of the aisle inside the state. Idaho is a very 2A friendly state. By the way, I looked up when I did the Everytown research. I pulled up Idaho on their gun safety laws grade, I think is what it was. And we were ranked 50th out of 50. So I'll be happy to take a failing grade from Everytown. That means that we have very, very good gun laws in our state. I'll take that. Anyway, where was I going with this? Oh, the Caldwell Nights Rodeo. So Idaho's Second Amendment Alliance, Greg Pruitt, they're the state's biggest pro-2A organization. Greg and the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance have worked very hard for a long time to propagate the preemption laws and really work to keep, or even with the constitutional carry stuff. Greg was integrally and deeply involved in making the carry laws in the state better for the gun owner. He's looking at this Caldwell. Now, this is where I heard about this first. He's looking at the Caldwell Nights Rodeo, and he really feels like, and I can't say that I blame him, he really feels like it's a betrayal to the laws in Idaho, the culture of the gun community and the rodeo community, honestly, and just the Second Amendment altogether. And like I say, I can't really say I disagree with him on this. A few years ago in Coeur d'Alene at the city park or something, there's some kind of event, and they said no guns allowed, even though it was public property. And I remember Greg was up there, and he got in quite a bit of a pretty in-depth argument with, I think it was the mayor of Coeur d'Alene at the time.
Okay. What kind of American are you?
And it was a big deal. And it was really what changed some of the gun laws in Idaho about allowing firearms owners and Second Amendment advocates and people that just carry guns for their own personal safety. It helped them a lot. The legislators in the state are very good with some of them. We have a few that pretend to be Republicans that aren't so good when it comes to Second Amendment. But at that time, we had some awesome 2A-minded legislators in the state, and they worked very hard to kind of fortify the preemption laws and constitutional carry and not really stand your ground, but kind of some stand your ground doctrine as well. Is fabulous. It's been great for gun owners. But when Caldwell decided to do this with the rodeo, it really sparked some issues. Now we need to look at it both sides, because I can kind of see it from both ends. Yes, this is city property, and citizens should be allowed to exercise their rights on public property. But when it comes to whoever runs the rodeo, because I don't necessarily, if the city runs the rodeo, maybe this theory doesn't work so well, but if it is a private entity that is running the rodeo, taking care of the, renting the venue for the rodeo, some of their insurance costs could really change and be drastically higher when it comes to allowing firearms on the premises during an event. Look at what was the Gun Con? That's what I was trying to say, right? If you paid attention to Gun Con this year, Johnny Appalachia, whatever you want to call him, he got kicked out of Gun Con, as well as a few others, because of their political views. Now that is a little bit different because it is a privately owned venue, but I imagine that had something to do with guns as well. Actually, it was different, honestly. Their issue was something different. I guess this doesn't relate at all. I don't know why I even brought it up, because it doesn't. It's apples to oranges. But regarding the rodeo, the Caldwell Knights Rodeo, I don't know if they were wanting people. I don't know if it was just no guns allowed signs were posted. That's on the other side of the state from me. But it is frustrating as a gun owner and as a 2A advocate that people want to restrict our rights because of cost. That's ridiculous. I think that's kind of unfair. It's disgusting. It's another way to regulate a right away just because of an inconvenience. Again, I can kind of see it from whoever's hosting the venue, whoever's responsible for insurance. I see it on that side too, because it could cost them. I mean, they could get shut down completely because of some sort of insurance claim. So I guess what it comes down to with the Caldwell Knights Rodeo, concealed is concealed. I guess if they're wanting, that's a whole different story. Private property can do whatever they want when it comes to their personal rules on private property. I look at the Ford Center, which is privately owned, I think it's in Nampa over there. You cannot carry knives and guns in there unless you're law enforcement, or if you know how to do some things, which I don't know how to do those things. But it's prohibited, but it's private property. But then you look at like Boise State, Idaho, you can carry on Boise State grounds, but you can't carry inside of a structure. And that includes the Boise State Stadium. And they are sticklers about any kind of weapon that they can find from getting in there. Again, I don't know how to do that. But people do. I do know people that know how to get things in. Different story. We probably shouldn't talk about that at all. I'll just end that comment there. Nonetheless, private property has the right to do what they want, but does a public property, something that is usable by all citizens, can a privately owned venue or somebody that's got a permit for the use of that property, do they have a right to dictate your rights away on public property? I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. I already know what some of the laws say about it, at least in the state of Idaho, but what do you guys think? Is that fair? Is that logical? Is there nothing wrong with that? Or is that just a piss poor way to keep us from enjoying our rights no matter where we go? I'd sound off on that. Again, let me know in the comments, or just let's start a thread on Twitter. I'd be curious to see what you guys think. Let's jump to the next thing on the list on the show notes, shall we? When Trump took office, well, even when he was running for president, the Second Amendment community was given a promise by Trump that things were going to change, that the federal view on firearms and on the Second Amendment was going to change. He made a promise. I remember that first day in his office when he sat down after his swearing in, that he made a promise to us, to the gun owners in the United States. I don't know if those promises will be fulfilled and complete. Some things have been great. He's been surprising me with a few things over the last few months, and other things are just milquetoast lip service in a way. But if you remember, in April of this year, the Department of Justice created a task force to look into anti-gun laws. They were going to combat things that were just unconstitutional and quite repugnant to the Second Amendment. If you remember, Biden, in his era of dictatorship when it came to the Bill of Rights, they created a zero tolerance policy for FFL holders, meaning if a gun store makes any mistake, their license was going to get revoked. Their justification for this measure was these FFLs, whether it be a home-based FFL, they were doing things illegally, and that's how a lot of gangsters and thugs, that's how they were getting their guns, because they were being illegally trafficked through some of these less than up and up FFL holders. And that might be the case for some. There probably are a few FFL holders out there that are doing things that they shouldn't be. But as a majority, folks with FFLs, if they're going through that process of getting a federal firearms license, because it's a process. You don't just fill out an application and then get approved. That's not how it works. There's inspections, there's visits with field agents, there's training, there's a lot that happens to get an FFL, and different levels of FFLs, because one FFL, doesn't cover all aspects of firearms and NFA. There's different levels and different costs associated, different procedures that need to take place, and different background checks, if you will, to be able to attain each level of an FFL license. And what I mean by that is you can have a regular FFL where you can just be the guy that buys and sells firearms for the purpose of making money as doing business, right? But then you can jump up and say, okay, I want to manufacture some of the things that I want to sell. That's a different class of a license. Well, there might be the guy that says, well, I want to be able to have full autos. Maybe you're a range and you want to be able to have full autos to run on the range. Well, that's a different classification of an FFL with more strings attached to it on the federal side. Well, maybe you want to be a gunsmith inside there. Well, there's another FFL, another classification that you have to worry about. So these different tiers and these different spheres of influence when it comes to a license. It's arduous. It's a pain in the butt. It's not necessarily expensive. You might be surprised on how cheap some of these FFL licenses, the licensing, that was kind of redundant. You might be surprised at the cost of an FFL, but there are definitely expensive strings attached. Anyway, that was a long ways to get to where I wanted to talk about right now. So Biden in 2021, they passed the zero tolerance rule when it came to FFL holders. At that point in 2021, I got to look at my notes here because this is kind of startling or surprising here. Maybe, I hope I wrote this down. Yes, I did right here. So in 2021, after the policy was enacted, revocations, meaning the federal government taking licensing away from FFL holders, it jumped. So in 2021, I think there was 11 revocations, I think, that year. But in 2022, it jumped to 88. By 2023, it was 157. Then 24, I think it was 147 FFLs that had been revoked. So you went from a very small number, which they may have needed to be revoked at that number, to mom and pop stores, to small business owners, not only being harassed, but their whole livelihood being taken away from them over things like spelling errors. If you've ever filled out a 4473, the county versus the country, that was something that always got mistaken. People would think it said county or country, and they put in something that would be wrong and it needed to be corrected. Or they might have said street instead of road when they filled it out. Anyway, something small that can be corrected. Remember, a 4473 is a federal document, and lying on a federal document is kind of a big deal. That's the way the federal government under Obama looked at it. Obama, same thing. Under Biden, looked at it. So, because it was a zero tolerance, any kind of a spelling error, any kind of a small mistake, no matter no strikes or anything like that, it was an immediate revocation. Big deal. Like I said, there's a lot of folks that lost their businesses because of something that could easily be corrected by a field officer from the ATF. But no, they decided to just take licensing away. Well, President Trump, let's come back to the current, they promised to get rid of the zero tolerance rule. Looks like, what was it, August 9th? I can't remember when for sure they decided to do it. And we thought everything was hunky-dory, right? The whole firearms community said, yeah, that's great. Let's work on getting some of these people their licensing back from unfair practices by the federal government. Well, recently, I think it was actually just yesterday, this is why I just put it in the notes and why I probably should have read through it a little bit better. Yeah, that was on the 19th of this month, August. Turns out that Bondi, remember, she's not really that gun friendly. And you saw my video about Trump and the anti-gun measures that have taken place under his leadership. They're not that strong on the Second Amendment. And it turns out that they actually may have not told the entire truth when they said they were going to get rid of the zero tolerance rule. Apparently, there's things that the ATF has reintroduced that they're going to keep some of this Obama, gosh, I said it again, might as well be the same thing, Biden era zero tolerance policies that they're going to remain. This is a big deal because it influences how we get firearms as gun owners. Yeah, there can be inheritances and things like that, but anything new has to come through a federal firearms license holder. The lie about just ordering a gun online and it ships to your house, if you've never bought a gun, that doesn't happen. You can't just have a gun sent straight to your house. This isn't 1950 out of the Sears and Roebuck catalog. That doesn't exist. Every gun, firearms are the most regulated industry in the United States. I don't care if you believe me or not. This is reality. When a manufacturer makes a firearm, they have to stamp it with a individualized serial number, and there's other criteria that have to be marked on that firearm by the manufacturer, by federal law. That gets recorded and that gets sent to the ATF. Then, when that manufacturer decides that he wants to pass that along to a distributor, where almost all firearms license holders, firearms retailers, they buy through distribution. So, let's just say the gun manufacturer sends, we'll just say an AR-15. He has to stamp that AR-15 with an individualized, specific number with specific information on that firearm. That goes to the distributor. Then the firearms manufacturer has something called a bound book that keeps track of everything they manufacture. In the bound book, it shows where that gun went, when it went, and the licensing information of the distributor, because the distributor has to have an FFL. Now the distributor gets this fancy new AR-15 from the manufacturer. They have a bound book. Within their bound book, it records where they got the gun from, the date, the serial number, and all sorts of other specific information on that firearm. Well, then your favorite gun store says, hey, I want to buy that AR-15. I think my customer will like it. Okay, so then the distributor sends it to the retailer, and that same process happens again. That information is recorded. It's then when it gets to the retailer puts it in his bound book under an acquisition. All that information that was recorded from the manufacturer as far as serial number, all that stuff is then put in the bound book of the retailer. And then when that gets purchased by a customer, that has to be recorded in that bound book. There is a paper trail that's highly regulated. And guess what? News break. The federal government can look at any one of those bound books at any time for no reason if they want to. They can look at those bound books, and so they know at least who the primary purchaser of that firearm is. I know there's no database where they can track and find out who owns what gun, but there's not a lot of steps there for the federal government to find out who owns what. It's really not that hard, because by federal law, anyone related to the manufacturing or selling of a firearm have to keep detailed books about where stuff goes. It is the most highly regulated industry in the United States. That's where it comes down to the actual retailer, the person that's selling guns to the consumer. If we can't buy a gun because they're regulated, like I say, if these retailers are unable to sell firearms, then we can't buy firearms. It should be pretty self-explanatory. We can't buy these guns if there's no FFLs to sell them. That's why this is a problem. They don't have to get rid of the Second Amendment, but if they make it difficult because of the process of owning or obtaining and keeping, I should say, an FFL is so difficult, then that really prunes down where the citizen can purchase a God-given right, an enumerated right. They can't exercise it if there's only a few places to do it. That's where the problem is. Now, are we going to see anything change? Probably not. I have a sneaking hunch that Pam Bondi and the DOJ don't really care about our gun rights. They might throw us a bone every once in a while, but I honestly feel like they're all on the same team. I hope I'm wrong on that. I just haven't seen a lot of real strong evidence that they give a damn. I.e., look at the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act. If these politicians, if the Republicans really did care about our Second Amendment rights, we would have seen some major action take place inside the big, beautiful bill, but it didn't happen. Now, maybe they're playing 8D chess and they're working it through the court system so it actually has some basis and some structure when things change to where they can't be removed very easily when the next administration comes through. I don't know. I mean, that could really be the case. Maybe they're just trying to establish some history and case law to where things are going to be a lot more fortified. That's fun to think about. I wish I had the answers for you, but I'm not real confident that the modern Republican Party really cares about honest Republican principles. I think they're really just Democrats, but decaffeinated, if you will. So zero tolerance, we'll see. It doesn't look like it's gone away completely. We could chalk that up to my episode about Trump and gun laws, I guess. We'll see. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I guess to be fair, because I had to reference my notes, this new ATF rule, it's more lenient than the Biden era stuff. It's more geared towards something maybe a little bit more egregious, dispositioning a gun before a background check or still giving it to somebody even though they failed the check, that kind of stuff, which is definitely more egregious. But I don't know. The ATF rule, the proposed rule, does exist. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. I don't know. Like I say, I really don't have confidence in Pam Bondi or the DOJ at this point. We'll see. I don't want to keep harping on negative stuff, so I'm going to talk about something a little bit more positive. And the next thing that we're going to talk about is on the 12th. Who was it? It was Nigel. I don't know how to say that. Nugan. It's a weird name. Anyway, V. Bonta. They struck down the one gun a month rule that California had established, which is great. That is great news for our friends in California. They still have issues with the official roster for handguns. There's still tons of restrictions that exist in California. I'm sure this isn't gonna really, the state's gonna find a way to really make it harder for gun owners. They always do, because it's California, and Gavin Newsom, who is going to be running for president, by the way, is definitely not 2A friendly. I don't care if you watch the Sean Ryan show and he accepted the gift of the SIG. He didn't get to keep that. He wasn't going to keep that. He's anti-gun. I don't care what he says. I don't believe that guy. Look at the state. It should be pretty obvious. So there's that Nguyen versus, how do you say that? Nguyen. Yen, I guess. V Bonta. So there you go. The 1 gun a month purchase is gone because of the Bruen decision, which is landmark, which has helped and continues to help the gun owners across the country. Thank you for the Bruen decision, by the way, the Supreme Court, because that has really developed a landscape and a way to navigate through these anti-gun bills to really change them. Another thing that happened at the 10th Circuit Court in New Mexico, because of the Bruen decision, again, they got rid of their 7-day waiting period. Well, they didn't get rid of it, but a judge found it unconstitutional according to the Bruen standard now. So now, hopefully, it ends up sticking, because there always seems to find a way that the anti-gunners, they always find ways to make things a mess. But the 7-day waiting period in New Mexico is unconstitutional, which we already knew that. That's a pretty big pro 2A stance, by the way. And then the 8th Circuit Court in, where was this? Minnesota. They said that the restriction of 18 to 20-year-olds from carrying a gun was unconstitutional. I'm curious to see where this one goes, because it's Minnesota. That state is got a weird dynamic going on with all their new citizens from a particular country. We'll see where that one goes. But they said that according to this court case from the 8th Circuit, that 18 to 20-year-olds can carry a firearm. So that's kind of neat. You know, I mentioned the DOJ's Second Amendment Task Force. Apparently, they're still doing some pro-gun things. They've been looking into other things that California's been doing about delaying concealed carry permits. We'll see where that one goes. I don't know. California is a weird animal. And that district court, man, they're all over the place when it comes to ruling. It's kind of hard to pin down exactly what they're saying. But again, if we go to the Bruen standard and maybe look at some of the other history of some other court cases that have taken place, hopefully California will open up to the gun owner. California is a beautiful state. There's a lot of great people in California. It's just those densely populated cities are really screwing up the politics for that state. I feel bad for Cali. Just like Colorado. You guys need to clean up the system. You guys voted these people in. You need to vote them out. Figure out a way to make it happen. Another interesting pro 2A thing, Ken Paxton, who's the Attorney General of Texas, has signed on to I think it's a 14-state lawsuit against the federal government, attacking I kind of mentioned this earlier, but trying to fight against the NFA as far as all those regulations that were supposed to disappear in the big, beautiful bill. And maybe this is the correct avenue. I kind of mentioned that earlier. Maybe it's going through the courts is a more substantial and fortified way to take care of the NFA. We'll see. My state signed on to it. There's a lot of other states. Again, I think it's a 14-state lawsuit right now against the federal government to repeal some of the restrictions of the NFA. From what I understand, I don't know this for sure. I think it's going against SBRs and suppressors and SBSs. The machine guns, I think they're going to probably stay on there forever. Could we see a true alteration of the NFA? I hope so. Ideally, I think the NFA should be completely gutted and thrown away. I think the ATF is a useless machine of the federal government, because I'm looking at it through a mindset of freedom. And of course, sometimes the government looks at it as a mindset of tyranny, and they look at it as a very useful organization because they can use it as a weapon when needed. And they have. By the way, the other day was the anniversary of Ruby Ridge. We can see how the federal government and specifically the ATF can really use a heavy hand and manipulating a situation that doesn't end well. Again, Ruby Ridge, the anniversary of Ruby Ridge was just a couple days ago. And then it wasn't very long after that Waco took place. And then we look at things like, what's his name that was the director of the airport in Tennessee, right? The Clinton airport. I can't remember that guy's name. And then Tate Adamandak, or CRS Firearms, or Dexter Taylor. Like, we're seeing that the Department of Justice and then the ATF, I guess in Dexter's case, it wasn't really that way because the ATF said no, they weren't going to have any charges. But we're seeing that these anti-gun laws that are heavily influenced by the Department of Justice and the ATF can be used as a weapon to really tear people's lives apart, or much worse when it comes to things like Waco and Ruby Ridge or Lavoy Finnegan. There's somebody else, I guess you can kind of look at the same way. Do I have trust issues with the feds? Obviously, I do. What are you going to do? You know, the courts have been kind of all over the place. You look at Rahimi, right, when they said violent criminals cannot possess a firearm for self-defense, which I still have issues with that. If you paid your dues to society, you should be able to have all your rights restored. So they ruled on that, but they wouldn't rule on some of the assault weapons cases that were trying to come through. So it's really hard to judge the mindset of what the Supreme Court wants to take on and what they won't take on. Maybe the pro 2A justices are working on a way to make things happen in a systematic manner because they understand things better than I do when it comes to the legal system. I don't know. I probably not. I'm probably just thinking maybe it's kind of a cool thing to do. Nonetheless, the Bruin test, or at least the criteria established in the Bruin case, really has changed the way the courts have to look, are required to look at Second Amendment cases, as long as it meets within the text, history, and tradition that has to be within those bounds. What a monumental case that was, and it's going to keep going in the future. Could stacking the Supreme Court change some of these rulings? Yeah, absolutely. Are we going to have politicians and anti-gun groups really push hard against any of these decisions, whatever pro-gun decision we have? Yes. Are we going to have groups like Everytown trying to find ways to subvert and sneak in through some sort of crack inside the stone of the Second Amendment to crack it open? Yes. All these things are going to happen. Can we trust Republicans to defend our Second Amendment? No, absolutely not. That defense has to come from you and from me and other folks within the Second Amendment community. We have to be voting the correct people in. We can't just vote because of a letter after their name. We have to know who these people are. That's where getting involved in some of these pro 2A groups makes such a big difference. That's where getting involved with groups like it's hard. I was going to say like groups on Twitter or Instagram or social media in general, but those you have to be really delicate with, because sometimes the people you're talking to are not what you think they are. Kind of like Randy Weaver's friends that he thought he had friends. They weren't quite who he thought he was, and he got hemmed up, and things happened. We have to be mindful, we have to be proactive, and we have to pay attention to what's going on in our state, because it's the state level that really matters, and that's what changes at the federal level at some point. We have to get together. We have to work together. There's no more time not to. It's just the way it is. I think I'll just stop there. I'm looking at my show notes to see if there's anything else I'm missing. But tell me what you guys think. Tell me about what you think about not prosecuting open carry in DC. Tell me about what you think with the Everytown, their gun safety classes and their training, which I'm still really curious about. What about public areas that are rented out by private entities and then controlling or restricting firearms use in those public spaces? I really want to hear what you guys have to say about that, because that is probably what's going to affect us the most frequent, and maybe at the loudest level. That's it. That's the show. I don't know what else to tell you. You guys are awesome. I really do appreciate your time here. I probably should have said this in the beginning of the video, but if you like what I do here, if you like having a voice inside the Second Amendment community, please like and comment and share these videos with your friends. It means a lot to me. I still have a goal of hitting 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Is it possible? Yeah, absolutely, it's possible. but it's impossible without your help. So that's where I'm asking for you guys to pitch in a little bit, and it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost you anything. Mind you, if you jump to the link tree, I almost said LinkedIn. You can go to my LinkedIn if you want. It's pretty boring. But if you go to the link tree, which if I remember, I'll attach to the show notes. There's lots of ways to help support the show in other ways if you have the means to, which would be greatly appreciated. You guys are awesome. I appreciate everything that you do. Don't be offended. Don't be scared to make your voice heard about being a gun owner or a Second Amendment advocate. We need more people to speak up. The voices that we have on YouTube, yeah, they may have a broader reach, but their voices are no louder than yours. You have a voice. God gave you a voice to share your passions and your loves, sometimes your fears, because all that makes a difference in the world. You are just as important as any of us that are trying to speak out as much as possible. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you. I love every one of you. Make sure that you take somebody shooting, and don't forget, you got to stay range-minded. See you guys later. Stay safe. Bye.
Tut, 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 tut. Bye-bye.